DDoS extortion is something that has been proliferating around for as far back as I can remember. And ever since really DDoS has been around, ever since ransomware has been around, we've had this idea of holding something for hostage or, demanding payment in order to stop some sort of nefarious activity. Well, DDoS extortion works a little bit different than maybe some of the other extortive events that we see. With DDoS, it's almost always the adversary launching a demonstration attack, following it up with some form of email that says, pay us Bitcoin or else. Typically, their or else threat is magnified greatly beyond the demonstration attack. And in some instances, they do come back and launch attacks. But to date, we've never really seen a DDoS extortion crew really meet what they say they're going to do. They usually say, we're going to come back and launch a 2 terabit per second attack at you. We don't really see that happening. In fact, if they do come back, it's often about the same size attack as the demonstration attack. Thankfully, we don't really see organizations paying these guys. Why they continue to launch these attacks, it's mystery to me, but they continue to do them. We continue to track them. There's a couple of notable groups here that I want to bring attention to. Lazarus DDoS, or what we call LBA, they started about August of 2020. And then more recently, we have a group called Fancy Lazarus. And I'll get into both of these. So with LBA, we initially saw them going after financial institutions. Now, when you think out of it from the mind of an adversary, specifically guys doing extortion, their primary mindset here is, I want a payday. And so what do? They go after the money. So financial institutions, commercial banks. From there, let's go after insurance companies. Let's go after travel exchanges. Let's go after currency exchanges. The New Zealand Stock Exchange, that can be laid at the feet of LBA. At least they took credit for it. And so any number of these things that are financially motivated. Well, they realized, man, we're not really getting a payment here. So let's expand. And so we started to see regional expansion. We saw industry expansion. And now today, we still see a lot of financial institutions hit. In fact, just last week, we were looking at some potential LBA stuff that was hitting 4 or 5 different banks around the world. And so they're absolutely still going after financial organizations, but they've expanded to IT and to energy and all of these different places. And so they're really kind of doing a broad swath of, whoever we can possibly get at to try to get payment. Let's do it. Fancy Lazarus is a little bit different. Now, the extortion message is largely the same. They're using same kind of naming. Actually, Fancy Lazarus is self-dubbed. We actually created a Lazarus Armada moniker because in different campaigns they would say they're Fancy their Fancy Bear, their Lazarus group, their Armada Collective. 2 of which of those are APT, nation state sponsored groups. One of which was a DDoS crew from back in the day. And so we created LBA, so we didn't have to say all 3 other group names all the time. But Fancy Lazarus, they actually call themselves this. And they're a little bit different because their targeting schema was quite different than what we saw with LBA. What we saw is very specifically, they were going after regional ISPs and not just the internet service provider themselves, but they would find their authoritative DNS servers on those networks and try to take them down. And it was really kind of odd because one, the attacks are not sophisticated. They're not very large. It didn't show a whole lot of pre-network reconnaissance to target the weakest link. And often the spam messages they would send were just kind of lambasted to the organizations. And so there's a very clear line of demarcation between both of these groups in terms of sophistication and what they're going after. They have since expanded. They're going after different regions now, but still predominantly going after DNS servers in these internet service provider networks. And again, like I said, they will say, we just launched an attack against you. If you don't pay us, we're gonna launch this again. Probably 30 to 40% of the time we see them come back with that. But for the most part, every customer that we've helped mitigate these things have experienced little to no loss or downtime at all. And so they're very rudimentary attacks for the most part. And as long as you are prepared to handle DDoS attacks and you have a plan in place, then you should be well defended against these DDoS extortion campaigns. But it's still important to bring them to light because it is happening. And specifically with LBA and their explicit going after those VPN concentrators, enterprises need to be aware of this so that they can make sure that they're securing those properly. Don't name something vpn.company.com. Name it something obscure so they can't actually get immediate access to that. They could probably still dig a little bit deeper to see what kind of ports and protocols are running, but at least you're taking one extra step to ensure they're not targeting your critical assets. And so it's important to know, Lazarus Armada, as well as Fancy Lazarus, they're both out there. They're both doing these campaigns. They're both trying to extort victims. Recommendation from Netscout and everybody here at Acert, do not pay the ransomware. get some DDoS mitigations in place, and it's going to go a lot further than paying ransomware and giving in to the demands.